What is up, everybody? Josh Tapp here again, and welcome back to the Lucky Titan. And today we're here with Will Moore. He's the founder of More Momentum, and this was actually a really fun pre-interview. First off, got to learn a little bit about Will and his past exits and what he's been doing. But I was excited to have him on here to really talk about scaling, right, and that momentum and generating action in your business, because this is a problem I've been having with my employees. So I was excited to dive into this. But just another big push for all of you, I'm sure, to start taking action. So Will, stoked to have you here, man. First off, say what's up to everybody and we'll hop in.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Good to be on here, Josh. What's up, everybody? Ready to go. Let's rock.
Let's do it. Let's run into it, man. So yeah, I'm curious about this. First off, from a transitionary stage for yourself, is, you had a great exit from basically silent partner, cashed out, and you said, okay, this is the next thing I'm going to do. And More Momentum is the next step for you, right? There was nothing in between then.
No.
Yeah. So that was your core business. So I wanted to make sure of that before I dive into this, because I'm going to look like a fool if I do it otherwise. So with that being your next step, it's really intriguing to me how many people who exit transition into what I would almost call legacy-based business, which is what it looks like that you're doing at More Momentum. And that was what was exciting to me, is you're like, okay, now I give back. So talk to us a little bit about that, about why and how you're giving back with More Momentum.
That's a great observation. And that fits right in with, so I have these 5 principles that I talk about. And, as you, from birth to death, to me, it's one of these things is the older you get, the more you start to realize how important these certain areas of your life are, and that nurturing, building momentum in them, finding balance in them, how important they are. And one of them, legacy, is a huge part of that, as is career and finances. And so to me, there's this bridge between when you're younger, it's kind of all about the money. You're very selfish. It's in our DNA as humans to want more and more and more. Greed is good, Gordon Gekko style. And then at a certain point, if you're fortunate enough to get, to hit your goals, or to get that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and be drinking that pina colada on the beach, invariably, I think what happens is, including this happened to me as well. And as you said, I think a lot of people you've interviewed, is you sort of go, well, that feels awesome. Don't get me wrong, but now what? Right. And it's just this thing that people that haven't gotten there will spend their whole lives chasing, hoping, if only I had $1 million, if only I had 10 million, if only I could get my business to do X, Y, and Z. And then what happens is they've just got blinders on, and they're kind of going through life, and they're not enjoying the rest. And if you're fortunate enough to kind of get to a space where, I exited my company, and for a period there was this like, wow, I technically don't have to work for the rest of my life here. And yes, after 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears, and 23-hour days sometimes, it was a hell of a feeling. And I took about a month off, and I did all the things I'd wanted to be doing for the last several years. I played a lot of golf. I got massages. I read some books, and, that I was backlogged on, and whatever. But then it was as I said, it was very much like okay, now what? And for me, I'd had this, I already kind of knew what I wanted to transition. And I already knew that this feeling was coming, because I'd read enough self-help and personal wellness books to know that, you do get to a point where if you're not giving back and you're not leaving some sort of a legacy, it doesn't feel good. And even with our business, while we were in the midst of all the craziness, that was still part of it. And we were doing some of that stuff, but it really hit home when we got that big chunk of money, and it was like, shit, like, what am I just gonna, I can either do what a lot of people do, which is fill that hole I'm now feeling with more money and more power and more whatever, right? Which I think some people who don't understand these cores and these universal principles of what makes people truly happy will go out and do and say, okay, well, 10 million didn't work. Let's try 100 million. Right. But instead, like I said, I was fortunate enough to, I think, read enough and know enough about myself to know that now what I need to do is give back to and feel that joy of like giving. And it sounds cheesy, but I was fortunate to coincide all this with the birth of my first child. I now have two. I got a third on the way, three boys, crazy household here in the Mooreville. And just seeing these little guys starting to go from crawling to walking, and it's like, well, shit, even if I'm just helping them and giving them these, like what I know after all these years, I'm 46, of trial and error and huge mistakes and getting knocked on my ass and failing forward and, all these things, like if I can just give them some of these basics so that they don't make the same mistakes I did and not have them chase their tail, for their whole lives of thinking this is what'll make me happy and knowing it doesn't. I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. It's funny because this is why I love your branding. First off, is that to me, I realized that happiness didn't come from money or whatever. It's the momentum, right? It's that momentum that keeps you excited. And when momentum's happening in your life in any area, it gets you more excited to get out of bed in the morning. Like for me, I started losing weight last year because I got way too fat. And so I lost like 35 pounds. And, but it was, thank you, but it was over. It wasn't like one of those like quick losses, right? I took a lot of time before I even lost my first pound, but just seeing the pounds come off quickly, I got so much more excited about working out. And same thing with business, and it's that scoreboard almost for yourself. But then I am curious about how you view where you cap it, right? Because with entrepreneurs, I love asking them this question of like, well, how much do you want to make? And some people are like billions, and you're like, okay, but why? Do you want bodyguards? Do you want like what's the lifestyle that comes with $1 billion, right?
That's right. That's a great question too. And to me, the answer to that is, so it's a two-part answer. Let me start with the first part, which I took this course this year. It's been on my list for literally like 5 years. And I finally was like, it was like a week-long course. I'm putting everything aside. I'm doing this. It was the Yale happiness course, the science of well-being. I don't know if you're familiar or heard of it.
I'm not, no.
Started off several years ago. A professor just introduced it. It quickly became the most popular course at Yale. And then it got so big that they had to go into an auditorium for her to teach it. And then very quickly, it was like way too much interest. And so she ended up, it's on Coursera. It's free. Is how she's teaching it now, and millions of people taking it. And one of the things that she got into is sort of this miswanting as this default that we all have because of the society that we're born into of wanting these things that we think are going to make us happy, but they don't actually, kind of like what I was just discussing. And one of these, and she just goes, what's cool about the course is it's not just somebody talking and saying these things like I'm saying them right now. It's like study after study after study, like proven science. And one of these things happens to be, this amount of money that you make. And it's like, what is the perfect amount of money? So they went into some of these studies and they did show, and this was about 5 or 6 years ago. So at the time it was like, the amount of money that will technically, like when you make it, and then that's sort of like, okay, you've got your basic needs met, you've got the car you want to drive, a good car, you got a house, you can take care of yourself and your family, and your basic needs are met. Money actually has proven to exponentially come into play there in terms of making you happier. But then after that amount, and I think that amount at the time was around, I want to say $60,000, $65,000 a year. But then they said after that, there's not an incremental jump, right? So like if you go from, let's say that's then $200,000 a year, yeah, you might be a little happier and more content. But then if it goes up to like $1 million a year, you would think like, oh, well, that'll quadruple, but it doesn't.
Right.
And it's really interesting to see, when you survey these types of people, and it makes sense when you think about it, because like you look around and you see all these hugely wealthy and successful people, and what we think is the ultimate, like if I could only be there, my life would be, but none of them seem, happier than you or I feel like. And if you look closely, a lot of them are less happy, and you hear about all these horror stories. The lottery ruined my life. I mean, money does not equate to happiness. And so for me, the answer is, I know that type of house I want to live in. And it's not a 50,000 square foot mansion. It's a 5,500 square foot house, and it's in the area I want to live in, which I live in, and it's near friends and the things that I want to do. I'm just outside of Chicago. I'm in a suburb called Evanston. I'm driving the car that I want. Is it a Lamborghini? Nope. But maybe 10 years ago, maybe it would have been. But again, as you get older, you sort of start to value things in different ways, right? So now it's a car that I'm very happy with. It fits my 2 kids and the third one that'll be here in 2 weeks. And it's not having to stress day to day, and knowing I've got this nest egg on the side that's growing and continuing to build on its own passively. Like you were saying, the law of compounding is a huge thing I like to talk about. Things don't happen overnight. And if you try to make them happen overnight, you're going to end up getting bit. But if you do it slowly but surely and just take those little baby steps, whether it's your exercise, whether it's the money that you're saving and investing, it's going to pay off in the long run. So I know there's going to be a good pot of money there for my family. If something were to happen to me today, there's money. When I die, hopefully, it'll be in my 90s, whatever, hundreds at the time. Maybe I'll be cryogenically frozen. There'll be plenty of money for my family. And after that, it's kind of like, what do I need? Right? Like, they're going to have plenty of money. And I don't want to hand my kids. One of the lessons I've learned over the years is I don't want to hand my kids a big pot of money anyways when they turn 18. I want them to go out and earn it on their own. So you can only spend so much. And I'm not buying helicopters and jets and flying to, doing these things. So to me, that's my happy level. So the way I read it one time was, what do you feel like you need? Like, figure out what it is you need to get those basic needs met. And then sort of say, okay, this is my goal. I want to get to that. And then when you get there, just be careful. It's okay to then say, okay, well, my next goal is here. And, maybe we upgrade our house in 3 to 5 years, or whatever, but just be careful not to keep chasing and to not just want more and more and more, because that doesn't exist. And you'll never be happy if that's how you're looking at it.
Yeah. Well, and I agree completely. And I love all the analogies. So I appreciate that. It's funny to me that, it comes a lot with age, but I feel like it comes at a certain point when you have this moment where you're like, oh, I don't need any more money. Like the only thing I could buy more of is like a bigger boat, a bigger house. It ends up being, I don't know. It's not as much money as you'd think too. And I love working through that with people, because it's always that grass is always greener on the other side. And then you talk to anybody who's made any amount of money, over $1 million, I would say, it's like, at $1 million a year, you literally have no needs. Like, there's nothing that you can't have at that point, unless you're one of those people who's ridiculous, who feels like you have to have a mega yacht or a 150,000 square foot home or whatever, I saw a whole thing on that.
Yeah. And right. And that's a good point. And I like to tell, if I don't like to discourage people and say, you're wrong for wanting something like that. It's like, okay, well, if that's really what you want, because to me, I feel like they'll figure it out eventually. And for somebody to tell them like that's not going to make you happy, it's hard to convince people of that. So it's like, okay, all right, well, set your life and your goals around that and start getting there. And if they incorporate these other cores in their life, like it'll come sooner than later. And one of these other things that happened, that studies in this Yale course that was really interesting was they did another study where it was literally they asked people, what amount of money would make you happy? And they were, I think at the time, I'm trying to remember the exact amounts, but it was about 50,000 that people were making around $50,000. They all said almost like 90 some percent, they're like 100,000, around 100,000, like double. Right. And then people that were making 100,000 were like 250. It was a little bit more than double that they thought would make them happy. And then people who were making 250 jumped to like 1 million. Right. And it just goes to show it's all relative, right? And you look at your own life and what you were making 10 years ago and what you thought would have made you happy. I guarantee, most people are probably making more than that now, especially if they're listening to your show, you would hope. Yeah. But now I'm not happy. Now I have to make, so that again, just, you want to be careful with that chase, because that's just that brain your brain playing tricks on you and thinking that the grass is, like you said, always greener. And if only I could make that amount. But that's when you go to that, what I was saying before, like, all right, well, what are my basic, what are the needs that I want met? Like, what type of house do I want to live in? What kind of car do I want to drive? And it's all right if you want to drive a Range Rover. I've had 2 Range Rovers in the past. Like, that's okay. I'm not saying go drive a fuel efficient $20,000, although fuel efficient, yes, I am saying that.
You're a Tesla guy, aren't you?
I'm not, I would be, but I haven't been able to get one. So when I decided to switch cars, this COVID thing happened, and I actually did look at Teslas, but it was like a 2-year wait for the one I wanted. So
Oh yeah, they're crazy on the weights. That and the Rivians, by the way. Check.
I have a wait on, I have a wait for the Rivian, and I have a wait for that new H3 Hummer 3.
Yeah.
It's all electric as well. Not the truck one, but the other one. So again, like, that's a fun, that's not an insanely, I mean, it's like a $80,000-$90,000 car. I'm not, but that, to me, it's like, it's electric and it just looks really cool. Why not? I have the money to do it. What else am I going to spend the money on? That's another people, sometimes the opposite mistake people make is they start to earn this money and then they get really Scrooge McDucky about it. And they're like, I can't spend it on this, and like, enjoy your money. Like, don't be an idiot and just go blow it on stuff, but enjoy it, because you can't take it with you.
Yeah. Pass it on to the next people who need it too. Okay. Well, so, this does kind of spark the question of momentum in your own life. Right. And I want to turn the conversation to, because pretty much everybody listening to the show has employees. How do you encourage them to take action and to play on the momentum that's built on the company? Does that make sense?
Built on of their own company, you're saying?
So no, within our company. So for example, right, like the company has momentum. How do you encourage the employees to continue that momentum and translate it to their own lives as well?
Oh, gotcha. So I'm building an app. I have my own system that I've been using for many, many years. It's helped me in my personal life as well as my entrepreneurial business life. It all actually, when you actually step back and you look at universal principles and these things that have been around since the beginning of time and that are going to be around until we ultimately destroy ourselves, hopefully not, but we're on that path. You look at these things that truly make us happy, and if you follow, like, if you disobey these sort of laws, the law of compounding, like we were just talking about, is one of them. There's tons of them. You're going to find something's not right or something's not working. But if you do follow them, and if you start to build your habits around them, to me, habits are everything. You are your habits. Your habits are you. They don't care if they're good or bad, helping or hurting you. They're going to compound and they're going to do their thing over time. So it's like, what are the habits that you have? And so what I like to gamify them, and something that sort of triggered for me several years ago, where, I keep this spreadsheet and I was kind of showing people, and they were all like, it doesn't look fun. And I looked at all these, and it's not, but it's fun to me, but I can see why it wasn't fun to other people. So I'm like, in this day and age where, like, your attention span is like a gnat, and it's getting less and less every day that goes by, with all these zillions of things flying at us from every direction, social media, 8 different streaming things, it's like, okay, how do you get people to want to take these actions? And to me, it's gamifying it. It's making it addictive by adding things like rewards and points and social connectivity. So I'm building an app that is basically what I would want to use. But taking feedback along the way from my team and other people that are kind of testing it out, that basically does exactly what I'm saying, where it's like, okay, you start to have a little bit of success, and then you get that dopamine reward hit, and you see, oh, wow. So you're this rocket ship, and you've got these 5 core areas of your life that are the cylinders of your engine. And the idea is to break Earth's gravitational pull. You have to slowly but surely, using the law of compounding, replace your failure habits with success habits. And then, your first step is the first stop is the space station. Then you get to the moon. And then the idea is you're continuing to grow and head out into the universe, and you get to, different planets, and you're meeting aliens, and you're fighting through asteroid fields, and you're doing all these things. And each day is essentially just a way to hold yourself accountable and have fun doing it, as well as, compete against others, have other people help you and you support them and whatnot, to sort of say, okay, look, we're all in this together. We're all human beings. We all just want to be happy. These are the things that have been determined to make us happy. Let's base our habits around them, but you can't try to do it all at once or you're screwed. You got to do it one by one and you got to do it very slowly and in one core at a time, because again, you'll become overwhelmed and you won't do it. That's why I've set it up the way I have.
Yeah. See, I love that because, I, for myself, and I mentioned this earlier, but like even just working out is I loved working out in high school, for example, but 10 years later, I was sitting here going, I've tried about 45 times to get back to the gym and get consistent with it, but it was always a week of push hard. It's the entrepreneurial way, right? We go at it all in for a week and then we give up and go on to the next thing. And I realized for myself, I'm like, I've got to just work on what's completely doable, right? So I started with one a week. I was like, I'm going to work out one time a week. And then I got a guy in our office. We started doing that together, and we'd go to the gym and we said, hey, let's just do 3 times a week, no matter what. We set consequences for ourselves, and it worked. I mean, it worked really, really well because we're like, well, it's already Wednesday. We've done our 3 days. Let's just go again. Why not? Let's just keep it going.
That's it, man. And that's you just nailed it. So you're doing 2 things right. That is now, it's starting to spread into, and I guarantee you, without even asking you, I'll bet you there's other areas of your life that's starting to kind of spill over
Very
to,
much so.
where other habits and maybe different cores are starting to improve, because you're like, oh, I look better, I feel better. Now I'm going to do this, right? But yeah, accountability, having an accountability partner, with holding yourself accountable is a lot harder. That's what I'm kind of attempting to do with this app. But then in conjunction, having accountability partner, it's the simplest, easiest, best way to be, because it's like, right, you got a buddy and it's like, all right, we're doing this. And, you start small. So that's another way I use the term reducing friction. I love that term. I don't know if James Clear from Atomic Habits coined it or not, but that's where I think I first heard it. But it's basically putting elements into your life to reduce the friction so that you want to do these certain things, like an accountability partner. For instance, if you're snacking at midnight and there's Cheetos at eye level, move the fucking Cheetos. Either throw them away, or if you can't bring yourself to do that yet, put them on a bottom shelf and put the mixed nuts or whatever it is that you do want to eat right at eye level, right? So it's kind of, again, tricking your brain, doing these little things and little small things, right? And eventually those mixed nuts, at first you'll be like, they don't quite do the same thing as Cheetos for me. But once you get over that, and like I said, habits don't care if they're good or bad. Once you get over that sort of hump where it's like, you've kind of faking it till you're making it, and you're doing it enough times, then that goes on autopilot. And then all of a sudden, like, you don't even think about the Cheetos. I mean, maybe once in a while, but in general, this is my snack and this is what I do. And I don't have any guilt after I do it. I feel great after I do it. So it's like a twofer. And then again, that sort of ripples and spreads into other areas of your life as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. See, it's funny because this sort of conversation to me, you can talk about it all day too, of like, how do you finagle it to where you can structure your life in a way for the habits to start working for you. And I love it because there's a lot of different ways to do it. I know for myself, I'm a very socially driven person. And so I don't want to cause any pain on other people. And so for me, with me and my accountability partner, we said, hey, neither of us like running. So like, neither of us like want to go out and run a mile at all. So we said, hey, our consequence, if we don't make it to the gym 3 times a week, we're going to go run a 5K. And we held each other to it. And it worked because neither of us wanted to do it, because we said, if either of us missed one of those days, then both of us had to go run. And so neither of us did it because we wanted to keep each other from having to do it. And I've met people who will do like, hey, if so let's say, Will, like you miss your reading for the day, I have to shave my head. Right.
Right.
You're never going to miss, because you're like, I am not going to make Josh shave his head. Right. And wouldn't do me too bad. I'm basically bald already, so it doesn't really matter. But but yeah, to me, it just seems like it works so well to leverage that, the account.
Oh, it does. I mean, it's just you're these little brain hacks. You're just tricking your little dog brain, your lizard brain is what you're doing. You're tricking it into taking these actions for long enough until, again, once they're on autopilot, they're on autopilot. But getting there is very hard, very, very hard. And it's these habits that we've developed, they start, our main influencers growing up, first you're born naked, afraid, you've got your parents, then you've got your peers, your little playmates, then you've got school, then you've got, now, then it's media, then it's major life experiences that you've had. All these things shape the habits that we have today. And most people just other than the big ones where they're like, yeah, I shouldn't smoke and I know I should eat better, but there's like your life is made up of hundreds of habits every single day that you're doing, and most people aren't aware of what these are. And so part A, step one of everything is just kind of becoming aware of, okay, what am I actually doing? And here's where I am now. Here's the end of my life. Like, what's going to happen if I continue on this path? Like, how are these going to compound? And what's, and versus if I start to change these habits into these, where am I going to end up? And that's kind of one of my favorite ways to do it. I call it the back to the future list. You kind of go to the end of your life and you sort of say, where do I want to be in each of my 5 cores? What are the main habits I want to have developed? Like, you're getting eulogized basically at your funeral and somebody's going, I'll tell you, man, Josh, he was killing it in his 5 cores. Well, they wouldn't use that word, but they'd say physical health. I mean, the guy worked out up until the day he died, 3 days a week. He was he looked 20 years younger than he really was, and you just go through that in each of your cores and you're like, all right, if that's where I want to end up, what do I need to do to get there? And what am I currently doing now that needs to be replaced?
Yeah. I think media habits are an easy place to start for most people too. So I would highly encourage that. What media can you stop consuming even one day a week? I know for myself, I turned off social media for a month. I said, I'm going to do it for a month, and I haven't turned it back on. It's been months. Like, other people manage my social media for me. It's been huge.
That's a perfect example of you got out of the habit and it was like, I'm out of the habit. Well, I don't need to go back. And maybe there's a poll here and there, right? Where you're like, oh, I want to curious, but you're like, no, the feeling I have now is not worth going and looking at that. And it's the same. A buddy of mine quit drinking last year. People do this dry January. A lot of people do that. And he did it last January, and he got to the end of the month and he's like, all right, I'm done. And he just never went back to drinking because he'd gotten out of the habit of it. And he, it was very hard for him. But his family held him accountable and everybody kind of helped him. And now like once in a while, he'll be like, yeah, it would be cool to have it. Like, we won our paddle tournament together. And he's like, it'd be kind of cool to have a drink. But he's like, it's not worth for me going back to what I was doing.
Right. Yeah. And those are extreme examples, but there's little things that you can cut out that are so valuable, and then adding in better things. I know for myself, even just removing social media, because I never thought I was binging that much, but it was hours a day at the end of the day, from just checking on it here or there. And I've started using that time to learn a different habit or a new, I learned the Rubik's Cube. So nerdy, so random, but I was like, hey, that's something I can do in the evening time, and learned I can do it in under a minute now. So it's like, it's one of those things, they're dumb little things, but you're like, why not?
Dumb, right? You're swapping a failure habit. It's a perfect example. You swapped a failure habit for a success habit, because in general, social media makes people feel worse about their lives and themselves. Right. Unfortunately, teen suicide's at an all-time high, girls especially, and there's a reason for that. They look at these other people and they've got the perfect photoshopped pictures and life, and people only show their best moments, and they're like, why can't I be, right? And that, especially at that age when you're really vulnerable to suffering, but we do that as adults as well. And my wife, right? She's gotten way better, but she was at a point one time where I remember she used to be like, why don't we ever go on vacation? They'll be like, and she'd be like, I just saw this picture. I'd be like, okay. First of all, you have no idea what their life is like. You just saw one little picture, one little thing from their life that they did a vacation. Like, you can't, if you start comparing yourself to that and being like, why can't I have that life? Why aren't I? You're screwed. I said, let's look at the big picture, honey. Are we happy? Like, do we have great kids? Do we, and she's like, yeah, you're right. And that helped her to kind of wean off it. She's still not completely off it. And to me, I hate to say it this way, but it's kind of a necessary evil for what I do for my business, because I do feel like there is positive stuff that comes out of it, and so my YouTube channel, my Instagram, even though I'll admit, I don't personally browse.
You're a producer, you're not a consumer. That's the point.
But I want people to see my stuff and go, yeah, I feel better. And there's an actual act. So I'm actually in the process of completely revamping what I used to kind of just show fun, cool moments. And now I'm like, no, I want to give people actual little small action tips at the end, like a little example and a little action tip at the end, and what habit to replace, like a common failure habit people have, and how to gamify it, what little friction reducer they can put on it to make it easier for them. And then just have them have that takeaway. and then just kind of give these little nuggets so that they're more digestible. Because again, like you've got 0.5 seconds to get somebody, and it's they'll see your thing, but then it's awesome, and their life has changed forever until they scroll to the dancing monkey 0.5 seconds later, who's like, woo, and you're like, oh, that's what life's all about, right? So you gotta give them something real small and easy and digestible, and that's in any business. That's a business tip for any business that you're in.
Yeah, and I would agree entirely. Well, and everybody go check out More Momentum. There's a whole section on how to get ready for the app. By the time you listen to this, it might already be out, but make sure you guys go over there and download the app. I've already put myself on the wait list today. So we're going to have our team go on this journey. So I want to ask you, Will, just to kind of wrap this one up, putting yourself in the shoes of our listeners, right? They're sitting at, I'm just going to say $1 million. And they're trying to figure out how do I push myself to the next level of life, not just money. How would you help them determine which area to focus on first?
So there's actually a quiz on my website. It'll give you the gist. Like if you go to my homepage, and it's More Momentum, MOORE, like my last name, moremomentum.com. And right at the very top, it says take the quiz, and it'll sort of give you an overview it'll ask you 3 questions for each core. It's not a deep dive. That's something that I have something to help people with as well, but at least it'll give you the gist of like, all right, where do I stand in each of my cores? And then whichever one you scored lowest in, that's the one you're going to want to focus on. And if you go to my on that same website, there's actually a 5 cores page, and it gives you a little description of each of the cores and what they are and why they're important. And my app will obviously help people to really get more into detail with each of these cores and what it is, because it's all individualized. Like what exercise, for instance, like physical health is a core we all share. However, the exercise that you're doing and what you're doing to express that in your own life is going to be different for you and I, right? I like to play basketball. I like to play tennis. I like mixed nuts. That's why I gave that example. You may like a different healthier snack that's not mixed nut. You may have a nut reaction, but it's on par with whatever it is replacing the Cheetos with something healthier. You may enjoy running like my wife does. She loves running, right? So, but you figure out what those things are, and you proactively find ways to, reduce the friction to incorporate them into your life.